Hi there, this is Kaushik Ranchod. Welcome to our weekly immigration show. Thank you for tuning in. I'm an immigration attorney representing clients throughout the 50 states. You'll want to stay tuned to learn about whether or not there is a 90-day rule now and what does this mean for you. So stay tuned. First of all, let's take a look at how this could apply to you. So when you come in to the United States on a visitor's visa, and then you end up getting married and applying for a marriage-based green card, that could be conceived as committing fraud or misrepresentation depending upon your actions. And that's why it's really important to know what are the correct processes. So there's a process called adjustment of status, and there's a process called the immigrant visa. It's really important that when you've entered, that you didn't have the intent to permanently stay in the United States. So then the question is, well, how does USCIS evaluate this? So first of all, let's get clear that in the summer of 2021, USCIS made it very clear that there's no 90-day rule, so they're not going to count days of when you enter the United States. However, that doesn't mean that you can just come into the United States and apply for a green card if that's what your intent is. So it's really important to note what your intent is, and USCIS rather uses a reasonable test to determine whether or not what your actions are look like you had the intent or you did not have the intent to permanently reside. So even though they're not counting the specific days, this is still something that needs to be looked at very carefully when you're applying for an application. And this comes up a lot with the marriage-based green card application or other types of immediate relative applications. So that doesn't mean that even though there's no 90-day rule with USCIS, now this is different than with the Department of State. Those are two separate agencies. We're specifically talking about USCIS rules. Even though there's no specific 90-day rule now, it's really important to note that USCIS is still going to look at your actions. And one of the things is the amount of time. That paints a picture. What were your actions before you came into the United States? Does it pass the reasonable person test? If you want to get married and be with your spouse permanently in the United States and you're outside the United States, the appropriate process is not coming in on a visitor's visa and getting married. Rather, it's applying for what's called an immigrant visa. And that's the consular processing system. And that's why when someone comes in on a visitor's visa, there could be a finding of fraud or willful misrepresentation if you entered on the visitor's visa with that intent. There may be circumstances that happen after your entry that led to applying for an adjustment of status that may be considered reasonable. So it really depends upon your unique situation. And it's really important if you have this situation to consult with an immigration attorney, because it's so case specific and it's really case by case upon what your unique situation is. There's no clear-cut answer. It really depends upon what happened to you, what was your specific intent, and the timing and your actions. Let's look at the different processes. So if you're in the United States and you apply for an adjustment of status, let's say you entered on a visitor visa, you didn't have the intent when you came in to permanently stay here. However, circumstances change, you apply for a marriage-based green card while you're in the United States. You can file the immediate relative petition, the 485, affidavit of support, work authorization, travel document, all at the same time. Right now, as I'm talking, work authorizations are taking 9 to about 13 and a half months or longer. And these times change depending upon government processing times. The Biden administration has indicated that they do want to decrease the processing times for work authorization. So continue to stay tuned because we are monitoring that. And once you file, then you will be called in for your biometrics to evaluate whether or not you have make sure you don't have any criminal issues. That's what they're doing the biometrics for. That would make you inadmissible. Then you would have your interview. You'll get the interview notice usually about a month before your interview. And then at the time of the interview, they're going to evaluate whether you're admissible to the United States, whether or not you have a real relationship if you're married to a U.S. citizen. And then after that, if everything goes well, typically you won't get the green card right on the spot. They will mail you a notice and your green card later. That also depends upon what the local office you are working with as well. Now, if you're applying for what's called an immigrant visa is if you're outside of the United States. I'll use the marriage-based example. You're outside of the United States, you want to come in and be with your U.S. citizen spouse permanently. Then in that situation, you file the I-130, and then after the I-130 is approved, it goes to the National Visa Center. And at the National Visa Center, some of the forms that are submitted are the affidavit of support, the DS-260, additional documentation. After all of that has been processed, and the NVC is very, very picky with adjudicating and making sure that all of this was filed appropriately and all the information is correct. Once that has been processed, then it will be forwarded to your embassy in your home country. Once you get that far, you should celebrate because you are almost there. You're at the home stretch, and hopefully things are going to speed up with processing times, because I know during COVID times it's been taking a very long time. Well, you've scheduled and have that interview. You'll need to make sure that you have your medical beforehand. At the interview, the U.S. Embassy officer is going to evaluate whether or not you have a real relationship and whether or not you're admissible. If approved, you will receive a packet. You'll take that packet and you'll give that to the port of entry officer when you come into the United States, and then you'll get a temporary green card stamp, and then you'll have your green card mailed to you once you're in the United States. So those are the two different processes. The immigrant visa process is a process where you're separated because one person is abroad. Now keep in mind that there's also the fiancé visa process if you're not married, and I've created videos on that, so you'll want to check that out. So just to sum up, there is not a 90-day rule now. However, the USCIS officer will still look at all of the number of factors on whether or not you had the intent to stay in the United States when you entered, whether you misrepresented yourself when you, for instance, came in on a visitor's visa, on what your intentions were. So I hope this video serves you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week. You're amazing for taking the time to better yourself. By bettering yourself, you're bettering your family. And by bettering your family, you're bettering our country. Thank you. Bye for now.